Her hands didn't shake when the security guard reached for her arm. They never did anymore. The moment hung suspended in the administrative hallway of St. Benedict's Hospital, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of industrial cleaner mixing with something metallic that never quite left her senses. Martin Gresham stood 3 feet away, his face the particular shade of red that came from authority being questioned. "You're done here, Miss Callahan." He emphasized the miss, not the doctor. Never the doctor. "James, please escort her from the premises." Security Chief James Parrish hesitated, his hand stopping inches from her shoulder. Something in her posture made him pause. The way she stood, weight distributed, hands visible and relaxed. He'd seen that bearing before, in places where hesitation meant death. For more stories like this, subscribe to Emergency Heroes Stories. 6 hours earlier, the morning had started the way most did. Iris Callahan had arrived at 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes before her shift, carrying coffee she wouldn't drink and wearing scrubs that hid the scar tissue on her right hand. The ER waiting room was always full. It always was. She moved through triage with the efficiency of someone who'd learned medicine in places where supplies ran out and time killed as surely as bullets. Her assessments were fast, thorough, and made the other physician assistants uncomfortable in ways they couldn't articulate. Dr. Amara Okonkwo watched from the nurse's station, dark eyes tracking Iris's movements with the attention of someone solving a puzzle. "She does it again," Amara murmured to Lily Tran, the second-year resident beside her. "Does what?" Lily didn't look up from her tablet. "Watch her hands." Iris was examining an elderly man with chest pain, her fingers finding his radial pulse with the kind of precision that came from doing it in the dark, in the back of moving vehicles, with explosions close enough to feel in your teeth. She counted silently, her eyes focused on the middle distance, reading information invisible to everyone else. Pulse is thready, respiratory rate elevated but regular, skin temperature dropping at the extremities. Her voice was calm, almost flat. She reached for her stethoscope without looking, a movement so automatic it seemed choreographed. "Sir, I need you to rate your pain for me, 1 to 10. "Maybe a 6, 7? The man's voice wavered. Iris's eyes sharpened. "When did it start?" "About an hour ago, but it's not that bad. Amara?" Iris didn't raise her voice, but Dr. Okonkwo was already moving. "Cardiac workup, full panel. I want him in a room in 3 minutes. Lily frowned. "His vitals are borderline. Protocol says." "Protocol doesn't account for what I'm seeing." Iris met her eyes, just for a moment, and Lily saw something there that made her step back. Not anger, something older than that. Knowledge that came with a cost. The man was in acute coronary syndrome. The full workup confirmed it 18 minutes later, and he was in the cath lab before the widowmaker in his left anterior descending artery could finish the job it had started. Gresham heard about it during his 9 a.m. administrative meeting. It wasn't the save that bothered him. It was the way she'd bypassed protocol, made the call without consulting an attending, acted with the kind of authority she technically didn't have. "This is the 4th time this month," he told his assistant, scrolling through incident reports on his tablet. "She's a PA, not a physician. She doesn't get to make those calls." She was right, though, every time. That's not the point. Gresham set the tablet down with the careful control of someone who wanted to throw it. "We have hierarchies for a reason. Liability, oversight, chain of command. She treats this ER like she's running a field hospital." His assistant said nothing, which was answer enough. At 11:34 a.m., Iris was in the break room, eating a protein bar that tasted like cardboard and staring at nothing in particular. Her coffee sat untouched beside her, cold now. She didn't notice Amara sit down across from her until the other doctor spoke. "Where'd you train?" Iris's eyes refocused slowly. "George Washington University. Got my PA certification in 2021. "That's not what I asked." The break room was empty except for them, the distant sound of monitors and conversations filtering through the walls like ambient noise. Iris took another bite of the protein bar, chewing methodically. "Those sutures you did last week, on the construction worker with the radial artery laceration." Amara leaned forward slightly. "I've only seen that technique once before. Kandahar, 2019. Flight surgeons showed me how combat medics close under fire. Iris's hand stopped halfway to her mouth, just for a second, just long enough. I don't know what you're talking about. The interrupted mattress pattern, the spacing, the way you tied off without looking at your hands. Amarna's voice dropped lower. You learned that in a place where you couldn't afford to look down, where threats came from directions you had to keep watching. I study a lot of techniques, Iris stood, throwing the rest of the protein bar in the trash. YouTube doesn't teach you how to check 6 exits while you're suturing. The words hung in the air between them. Iris turned back, and for just a moment, her carefully maintained mask slipped. Amara saw exhaustion there, and something deeper, a kind of weariness that came with carrying weight no one else could see. I'm just trying to do my job, Dr. Okonkwo. I know. That's what worries Gresham. At 2:15 p.m., Iris was... She's called to his office. She'd known it was coming, the same way she knew when supply lines were about to get hit, when safe houses weren't safe, when the silence before dawn meant something worse than noise ever could. She walked through the administrative wing with her badge clipped to her scrubs, her hands loose at her sides, and her mind already 3 moves ahead. That's where it started. Where Gresham told her she was being placed on administrative leave pending review of her repeated protocol violations and insubordination, where she said, quietly, people are alive because of those violations, where he said, that's not your call to make, where she replied, then whose call is it? Yours? You've never touched a patient in your life, where his face went red and he picked up his phone and he called security, where James Parrish walked in and saw something in her eyes that made him hesitate, where the world was about to break open. If you want to see what happens when the Pentagon comes calling, make sure you subscribe to Emergency Hero Stories, because what Iris does in the next few minutes will leave you speechless. The pager on her hip went off, 3 sharp vibrations, trauma alert, multiple casualties incoming. Everyone froze. She didn't. The pager's vibration cut through the tension like a scalpel through skin, 3 short bursts. Then the overhead speakers crackled to life. Trauma alert, multiple casualties, construction collapse at Meridian Center, ETA 4 minutes, all available staff to trauma bays. Iris turned toward the door. Gresham stepped into her path. You're not going anywhere. You're suspended. She looked at him with the kind of calm that made James Parrish's hand drop away from his sidearm. Not defiance, something colder. The look of someone doing math that involved lives instead of numbers. Sir, with respect, you can fire me after. Her voice carried no heat, no argument, just fact. Right now, people are dying 4 minutes from here, and you're short-staffed on a Wednesday afternoon. You want me gone? I'll leave the moment the last patient is stable. The overhead speaker crackled again. Repeat, all available personnel, estimated 12 to 15 casualties, severity unknown. Gresham's jaw worked. Behind him, through the office window, staff were already running toward the trauma bays. He could see Dr. Okonkwo barking orders, nurses prepping stations, the organized chaos of an emergency department doing what it was built to do. Fine, he bit the word off. But James stays with you, and when this is over, you're done. Iris didn't wait for him to change her mind. She was already moving. The ER had transformed in the 90 seconds since the alert. Trauma Bay 1 was clear, equipment laid out with the precision of an operating theater. Lily Tran was gowning up, her hands moving fast but not smooth. Nervous energy radiated off her like heat. Amara caught Iris at the bay entrance. They're saying structural collapse. Concrete, rebar, heavy machinery. We're getting the critical ones. How many surgeons on staff? 2. Davidson's in surgery, won't be out for another hour. Chen's on his way in, 15 minutes. Iris processed this in silence. 12 to 15 casualties. 2 trauma bays fully equipped. 1 surgeon available in 15 minutes. The math was simple and brutal. Triage protocol? She asked. Standard. Green, yellow, red, black. Who's running it? You are. Amara's voice dropped. I don't care what Gresham said. I need your eyes on this. The first ambulance arrived at 2:19 p.m. The
The sirens had been audible for 30 seconds before the bay doors opened and the stretcher came through, 2 paramedics running alongside it, 1 doing compressions. Male, early 20s, crushed beneath steel beam. The lead paramedic didn't break rhythm with his compressions. Extricated 14 minutes ago, he arrested in the bus, got him back, lost him again 2 minutes out. Iris moved to the head of the stretcher, her eyes scanning rapidly. Chest crushed on the left side, flail segment visible, even through the blood and torn clothing. Pneumothorax, almost certainly. The compressions were good, but fighting against ribs that had lost their structural integrity. Bay 1, she pointed. Amara, he's yours. Lily, assist. You're going to need a chest tube, probably 2. The second ambulance was 30 seconds behind the first. Female, mid-40s, construction supervisor. Penetrating abdominal trauma from rebar. Conscious but shocky, skin pale and clammy, blood pressure dropping, despite 2 units already running. Bay 2, Iris directed. Get me a trauma panel and type and cross for 8 units. The third ambulance brought 2 patients. The fourth brought 3. By 2:27 p.m., the ER was a controlled storm. Iris moved between bays with the efficiency of someone who'd done this in places where there were no bays, no monitors, no backup. Her assessments took seconds. A glance at skin color, a hand on a pulse point, a single question that revealed whether the brain was getting enough oxygen to matter. She tagged them with the column of someone sorting mail. Bay 1, hallway bed, fast track, wait. James Parrish stood near the intake area. His original mission, to escort her out, forgotten in the face of something he recognized from his own past. The way she moved, the way she saw things, the absolute absence of panic. A young man, maybe 19, came through on the 5th ambulance. He was conscious, talking, asking about his coworkers. Good signs. But Iris stopped dead when she saw him. Trauma 3, she said quietly. Now.
Iris frowned. He's stable. GCS 15, vitals within normal range. We've got worse coming. Look at his abdomen. Slight bruising, but he's not guarding, no rigidity. Look at how he's breathing. Iris's voice didn't rise, but something in it made everyone pause. Shallow, fast, he's not using his diaphragm. And that bruising, it's not presenting right for the impact pattern you described. She moved closer, her hand hovering over the young man's stomach without touching. What's your name? Marcus Webb. His voice was steady, but his eyes were scared. Smart. He knew something was wrong. Marcus, I need you to take a deep breath for me, deep as you can. He tried, got maybe 30% capacity before his face went white and he gasped. Internal bleeding. Iris looked up at the paramedic. That bruising is tracking. He's bleeding into his abdominal cavity, probably splenic or hepatic laceration. The shallow breathing is compensation. He's protecting the injury without realizing it. Lily appeared at her shoulder. But his BP is stable. For now. He's young, healthy, probably an athlete. His body's compensating. Give him another 10 minutes and he'll crash hard. She turned to Marcus, her voice gentler. You're going to be fine, but we need to move fast. Do you understand? He nodded, some of the fear leaving his eyes. Something about her certainty, her calmness, made belief possible. They got him into Trauma 3 at 2:31 p.m. Lily prepped the ultrasound while Iris scrubbed. James watched from the doorway, his phone buzzing in his pocket. Gresham, probably. He ignored it. The ultrasound confirmed it. Free fluid in the abdominal cavity, a lot of it. Marcus was bleeding internally, and his body's ability to compensate was running on borrowed time. We need a surgeon, Lily said, her voice tight. Chen's still 10 minutes out. He doesn't have 10 minutes. Iris stared at the monitor, watching Marcus's blood pressure. Still holding, still compensating. The math was brutal and simple. Wait for the surgeon, and Marcus might not make it. Act now, and she'd be performing surgery without credentials, without authority, and with a security guard and a suspended status. She thought of 11 children in Kandahar. She thought of orders she'd disobeyed. She thought of the cost of being right when the system said you were wrong. Get me a surgical tray, she said quietly. Lily stared. You can't, you're not. I know exactly what I'm not. Iris met her eyes. And I know what he needs.
Get me the tray or watch him die while we wait for permission. Amara appeared in the doorway. She'd heard. She looked at Iris, then at Marcus, then at the monitor showing his vitals. The moment stretched. Do it. I'll take responsibility. Iris's hands didn't shake when she made the first incision. They never did anymore. The scalpel moved with the precision of muscle memory carved into bone. Iris's first incision was clean, controlled, exactly where it needed to be. No hesitation, no second guessing. The kind of certainty that came from doing this in places where hesitation killed. Suction, she said quietly. Lily's hands fumbled with the instrument. She'd assisted in surgeries before, but always with an attending, always with the safety net of someone else's final authority. This felt different. Illegal, maybe. Definitely against protocol. But Marcus's monitor was already showing the early signs of decompensation. Blood pressure dropping, heart rate climbing. Iris worked with a rhythm that seemed almost meditative. Her hands moved independently of conscious thought, following patterns burned into her nervous system through repetition that went beyond training. This was reflex. This was survival made art. Retractor. Lily handed it over, watching as Iris's fingers expose the abdominal cavity with an economy of motion that wasted nothing. No extra movements, no flourishes. Just the absolute minimum required to do maximum good. Blood welled up, a lot of it. There, Iris's voice remained level. Lily, I need you to maintain retraction exactly where I position you. Don't move unless I tell you. Understood? Yes. Lily's voice was steadier now. Something about Iris's calm was contagious. Amara stood at the doorway, technically supervising, legally covering, but really just watching. She'd seen a lot of surgeons work. Fast ones, slow ones, brilliant ones. Iris was something different. There was no wasted cognitive energy on doubt. Every decision had already been made before her hands moved. Clamp. The bleeding slowed. Iris's left hand held position, while her right worked with the kind of fine motor control that looked effortless and was anything but. She was isolating the damaged section of spleen, determining in real time whether it could be salvaged or needed to come out entirely. Talk to me about what you're seeing, Iris said, her eyes never leaving the surgical field. Lily blinked. What? You're assisting. That means you're learning. What do you see? I see a lot of blood. Look past it. What's the architecture telling you? Lily forced herself to focus, past the blood, past the raw reality of opened human flesh, to the actual structures beneath. The laceration it's deep, through the capsule, but the blood vessels, the main splenic artery, it's intact? Good. Which means we can save it. We don't have to remove the whole spleen. Better. He's 19. His immune system needs that spleen. We take it only if we have no choice. Iris's hands continued working, placing sutures with a speed that seemed impossible.
Salvage when you can. Remove when you must. In the field, you learn fast which is which. Amara's eyes narrowed slightly. In the field, interesting choice of words. The suturing technique was what caught her full attention. Interrupted mattress pattern, precisely spaced, each stitch placed with identical tension. It was the kind of consistency that came from doing it hundreds of times, in conditions where failure meant death, and there was no one to call for backup. Military technique, no question now. Vitals stabilizing, the nurse at the monitor called out. BP coming back up, 110/70. Iris didn't acknowledge it, but her shoulders dropped slightly. A millimeter of tension released. She kept working. The door opened. Dr. Richard Chen stood there, surgical cap already on, hands dripping from a speed scrub. He was 52, had been practicing trauma surgery for 23 years, and had seen just about everything. He stopped dead when he saw what was happening. Who authorized this? His voice was quiet, which somehow made it more commanding than a shout. I did. Amara didn't move from her position. Chen looked at Iris's hands, at the surgical field, at the monitor showing Marcus's improving vitals. His face was unreadable. 23 years of experience let him assess a situation faster than most people could describe it.
"Continue," he said finally, moving to scrub in properly. "I'll close." No need. Iris was already closing, her sutures clean and fast. Almost done. Chen watched in silence as she finished the repair, closed the abdominal layers with the same economical precision, and placed the final skin sutures in a pattern he recognized but couldn't quite place. Military, maybe, or somewhere else where aesthetics mattered less than speed and function. The whole procedure, from incision to final suture, had taken 16 minutes. Chen checked his watch without meaning to. He looked at Iris again, really looked, seeing past the PA credentials and the quiet demeanor to something underneath. "Where did you train?" "George Washington." "That's not what I'm asking." Iris stripped off her gloves, disposed of them in the sharps container, and met his eyes for the first time. "Marcus is stable. His vitals are strong. He'll need monitoring for the next 24 hours, but the repair will hold. No complications anticipated." She moved toward the door. James Parrish was still there, phone in hand, looking torn between duty and something he couldn't articulate. "Miss Callahan." Chen's voice stopped her. "That suture pattern, I've only seen it once before. Surgical Journal, about 8 years ago. Article on combat medicine innovations. The author was a lieutenant colonel in Army Special Operations. She pioneered a technique for splenic repair in austere environments." Iris's face remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, memory, cost. "The technique was called the Golden 10 Protocol," Chen continued. 10 minutes from incision to stabilization. They said it was impossible in field conditions, but she did it 47 times in documented cases. 47 soldiers who should have died didn't. The trauma bay was silent, except for the steady beep of Marcus's monitor. "That lieutenant colonel disappeared after her last deployment," Chen said quietly. "Medical discharge. No forwarding information. Some people said she burned out. Some said she'd seen too much. Some said she'd been hung out to dry for doing the right thing when her command wanted something else." Iris said nothing. "That article included a photo, smaller than it should have been, kind of grainy, but I remember thinking the author had old eyes." Chen paused. "You're her." It wasn't a question. Before Iris could respond, the overhead speaker crackled again. "Trauma alert. Incoming critical. Single patient. Severe multiple trauma with suspected cardiac involvement. ETA 2 minutes. Dr. Chen to Trauma 1. Chen moved immediately, but he paused at the door. "We're going to talk after this. You understand me?" Iris nodded once. He left. Amara followed. Lily stood uncertainly, looking between Marcus's sleeping form and Iris's still figure. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Lily asked quietly. Iris looked at the small tattoo on her inner left wrist, the caduceus with the Roman numeral 11. 11 children who lived because she disobeyed a direct order. 11 reasons she'd walked away from everything she'd built. "Because some doors close for reasons," she said finally, "and opening them again has costs you can't always predict." Marcus stirred slightly, his vitals steady, his young body already beginning the work of healing. Alive because someone had seen what others missed. Alive because competence mattered more than credentials. Alive because she'd refused, one more time, to let the system's rules matter more than a human life. The monitor beeped steadily. Outside, sirens approached. The day wasn't over. The ambulance came in fast, sirens cutting out only when it hit the bay doors. Iris was already moving toward Trauma 1 when she heard the paramedic's voice cutting through the noise, sharp with the kind of controlled urgency that things were bad and getting worse. "Male, approximately 40, construction foreman, penetrating chest trauma, possible cardiac involvement. Lost pulses twice en route, got him back both times, but he's circling." The stretcher burst through the doors. Dr. Chen was already gowned, Amara beside him, their hands moving in the synchronized rhythm of people who'd worked together long enough to communicate without words. But Iris saw Chen's face when he got his first look at the patient, and she recognized that expression. The math wasn't adding up in their favor. The man on the stretcher had rebar protruding from his upper right chest. Not a lot of it visible, maybe 3 inches, but that meant nothing.
What mattered was how deep it went, what it had torn through on the way in, and whether pulling it out would kill him faster than leaving it in. His skin was gray. His breathing was rapid and shallow. The monitor showed a heart rate of 130 and climbing, blood pressure 60/40 and dropping. "Get me a chest x-ray, portable, now." Chen's hands were already assessing, palpating around the injury without moving the rebar. "And call surgery. If he's got cardiac involvement, we need a cardiothoracic surgeon down here yesterday." A nurse appeared at his shoulder. "Dr. Morrison's in surgery, won't be available for at least 90 minutes. Chen's jaw tightened. 90 minutes. The man on the stretcher didn't have 90 minutes. He probably didn't have 9. Iris stood at the edge of the trauma bay, technically not involved, still technically suspended, with James Parrish's hand hovering near her elbow like a reminder of unfinished business. But her eyes were tracking everything: the patient's respiratory effort, the slight jugular distension, the muffled heart sounds when Chen placed his stethoscope. "Pericardial tamponade," she said quietly. Chen's head snapped toward her. "What?" The rebar punctured the pericardium, blood's filling the sac around his heart. That's why his pressure's dropping and his heart rate's compensating. He's got maybe 10 minutes before the pressure completely prevents the heart from filling. "The x-ray will tell us." "You don't have time for an x-ray." Iris moved closer, her voice still calm but carrying an edge of absolute certainty. "Look at his neck veins, listen to his heart sounds, check his pulse pressure. He's got Beck's triad, textbook presentation." Amara was already listening, stethoscope pressed to the man's chest. Her eyes widened. She's right, muffled heart sounds, and the pulse pressure is narrow, less than 20. The portable x-ray tech arrived, maneuvering the machine into position. Chen looked at the patient, at the monitor showing vitals that were trending in only one direction, at Iris standing there with the kind of absolute conviction that couldn't be faked. "If I'm wrong about Morrison's timeline, if he gets out early—" "He won't," Iris cut him off, not rudely, but with the weight of someone who'd done this math too many times. "And even if he does, this patient will be dead before he gets here. You need to drain the pericardium now, or you're going to lose him. I'm not a cardiothoracic surgeon. Neither am I, but I've done this procedure 17 times in field conditions with less equipment than you have here." The number hung in the air. 17 times. That wasn't practice. That wasn't theory. That was battlefield necessity converted into survival statistics. Chen looked at her for a long moment. Behind them, the patient's monitor alarmed. Blood pressure, 55/30. Heart rate, 140. "James." Gresham's voice cut through the moment like a knife. He'd appeared in the doorway, his face still red, his authority reasserted now that the immediate crisis was supposedly handled. "I told you to remove her from the premises." Nobody moved. "Sir, there's a situation," James started. "I don't care about the situation. She's suspended. She doesn't belong in this trauma bay. Get her out or I'll have the police do it." The patient on the stretcher gasped, a wet, desperate sound. The monitor alarmed again, pressure dropping. Iris looked at Gresham, then at the patient, then at Chen. The choice was simple. It had always been simple. The system's rules or a human life. She'd made this choice before. It had cost her everything then. It would probably cost her everything now. "Do it," Chen said quietly. He wasn't looking at Gresham. He was looking at Iris. "Whatever you need, fast." If you're watching and want to see what happens when competence meets bureaucracy, subscribe to Emergency Heroes Stories. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, because what happens in the next 60 seconds will change everything. Iris moved. Gresham started to protest, but Amara physically stepped between them, her 5'6" frame somehow blocking his path completely. "Sir, with respect, you need to leave this trauma bay, now. I'm the hospital administrator, and I'm the attending physician, and I'm telling you that you're interfering with emergency care. Leave, or I'll have security remove you." The irony of the moment wasn't lost on anyone. Iris was already at the patient's side. "Ultrasound," she said, her voice dropping into a different register entirely. Command voice, the kind that expected instant obedience because lives depended on it. "Betadine, 18-gauge needle, at least 6 inches, 30C syringe."
Lily appeared with the supplies, her hands steadier than they'd been during Marcus's surgery. Something about watching Iris work had recalibrated her understanding of what competence looked like. The ultrasound confirmed it. Fluid around the heart, a dark pocket compressing the chambers, preventing them from filling properly. Classic and deadly. "Talk me through it," Chen said, positioning himself where he could assist. Iris's hands moved with the calm of someone who'd done this in the back of moving vehicles, in the dark, with mortars close enough to feel through the ground.
Coid approach. 45-degree angle, aiming for the left shoulder. You'll feel the resistance change when you enter the pericardium. She prepped the site, found her landmarks by feel, and inserted the needle with one smooth motion. No hesitation, no second attempt. The resistance changed. She drew back on the syringe. Blood appeared. Dark, venous. 40 cc's, then 50, then 60. The monitor's alarm cut off. Heart rate dropping. 120, 110, 100. Blood pressure rising. 65 over 40, 70 over 45, 80 over 50. The patient's color changed, gray to pink. The gasping respiration smoothed out. Chen stared at the syringe full of blood, then at the monitor, then at Iris. Jesus. She withdrew the needle, applied pressure, and stepped back. He's stable for now, but that rebar still needs to come out, and he'll need definitive surgical repair of whatever it punctured. Morrison needs to be ready the second he's out of surgery. "How did you—" Lily started. 17 times, Amara said quietly. She was looking at Iris with something that wasn't quite recognition, wasn't quite awe, but lived somewhere between them. She said she's done it 17 times. That's not medical school. That's not residency. A voice came from the hallway. Deep, measured, carrying the particular authority that came from wearing a uniform for long enough that it became part of your posture even in civilian clothes. Actually, that's combat medicine. Everyone turned. A man stood in the trauma bay entrance. Late 50s, gray hair cut military short, wearing a dark suit that somehow still looked like a uniform. His eyes went straight to Iris, and something in his expression suggested he'd been looking for her for a very long time. "Lieutenant Colonel Iris Callahan," he said quietly, "also known as the Surgeon of Kandahar, also known as the woman who saved 47 lives that the army said were already lost." He paused. "Also known as the officer who disappeared 3 years ago after Operation Twilight Shepherd." Iris went very still. Gresham's mouth opened, closed, opened again. The man reached into his jacket and pulled out credentials. "Colonel Dominic Hayes, Pentagon Medical Command. Ma'am, we need to talk." The trauma bay seemed to contract around Colonel Hayes's words. Lieutenant Colonel, Surgeon of Kandahar, Operation Twilight Shepherd. Each phrase landed like ordnance, reshaping the reality everyone thought they understood. Gresham found his voice first. "Lieutenant Colonel, she's a physician assistant. Her credentials are accurate for what she chose to disclose." Hayes stepped fully into the room, his eyes never leaving Iris. "Dr. Callahan holds an MD from Johns Hopkins, completed her surgical residency at Walter Reed, and served 8 years in Army Special Operations Command. She's one of the most decorated combat surgeons in modern military history." He paused. "She's also been missing from our systems for 3 years." Iris's face remained neutral, but her right hand moved almost imperceptibly to her left wrist, fingers brushing the small tattoo there. 11. The number that had ended everything. Chen looked between them. If this is true, why is she working as a PA? Why not disclose her full credentials? That's an excellent question. Hayes's tone suggested he'd been asking the same thing for a long time. "Dr. Callahan, is there somewhere we can talk privately?" "No." Iris's voice was quiet but absolute. "Whatever you came to say, you can say it here." Hayes studied her for a moment, then nodded slightly. A gesture of respect between people who'd both operated in places where privacy was a luxury and transparency sometimes meant survival. The Pentagon is establishing a new Joint Trauma Command. We're integrating military and civilian emergency medicine, creating protocols that work in both combat and domestic mass casualty situations. He shifted his weight, a tell that suggested the next part was harder. "We want you to lead it."
The silence was broken only by the steady beep of the foreman's monitor. Stable. Alive because Iris had seen what others missed and acted when others would have waited. "No," Iris said. "You haven't heard the details." "I don't need to. The answer is no." Hayes' jaw tightened. "Dr. Callahan, with respect, you're working below your qualifications, hiding your experience, and apparently facing suspension from a position you're vastly overqualified for. The Pentagon is offering you to what?" Iris's voice remained level, but something in it made everyone in the room take notice. "To go back? To put on a uniform and follow orders that prioritize politics over patients? To make decisions based on strategic value instead of human value?" She shook her head once. "I left for a reason, Colonel." "Operation Twilight Shepherd." Hayes said it quietly, but the words detonated like a shaped charge. "I know what happened." "Then you know why I'm done." Gresham, who had been silent while trying to recalibrate his entire understanding of the woman he'd tried to fire, finally spoke. "What's Operation Twilight Shepherd?" No one answered him. Amara was the one who pushed. "If we're going to understand any of this, someone needs to explain what happened. What did she do that made her walk away from everything?" Hayes looked at Iris, a question in his eyes. She didn't respond, but she didn't stop him either. Kandahar Province, 2021. Dr. Callahan was embedded with a special operations team conducting a high-value target extraction. They were ambushed. The team took casualties, but worse, the village they were operating in was hit
by secondary explosions, insurgent munitions storage that nobody knew was there. 11 children were critically injured. Chen's eyes went to Iris's wrist, to the tattoo with the Roman numeral 11. Dr. Callahan was ordered to stabilize the team and extract immediately. The mission parameters didn't include civilian casualties. The intel they were after had a time-critical window. She was given a direct order to leave the children. Lily's hand went to her mouth. "She refused," Hayes continued. "She stayed, operated on all 11 children in a partially collapsed building with limited supplies and active hostiles in the area. Saved every single one. But the delay meant the target escaped, and 3 members of her team died in a subsequent engagement while providing security for her unauthorized medical operations." The words hung in the air like smoke. "That's not the whole story." Iris's voice was soft, but it cut through everything else. "Tell them the rest, Colonel. Tell them what you found out later." Hayes hesitated. This part clearly wasn't cleared for public discussion. But something in the moment, in the audience of people who just watched her save 2 lives in the last hour, seemed to shift his calculation. The high-value target we were extracting wasn't what we thought. He wasn't an intelligence asset. He was running a trafficking network. The children in that village were witnesses to his operations. That's why the insurgents hit the village. They weren't after us. They were eliminating evidence. Gresham's face went pale. So she was ordered to abandon witnesses to save a criminal? She was ordered to follow mission parameters based on intelligence that turned out to be false. Hayes' voice carried the weight of someone who'd spent 3 years living with that knowledge. By the time we realized what was really happening, Dr. Callahan had already been processed for insubordination, medical discharge. Psych evaluation suggested she was unfit for continued service due to moral injury and inability to follow orders in high-stress situations. "Moral injury," Chen repeated quietly. "That's what they call it. That's what they call it when you're right and the system can't admit it was wrong." Iris's voice held no bitterness, just fact. "I saved 11 children, lost my career, 3 soldiers died, and the man we were supposed to extract walked away to keep trafficking." She looked at Hayes. "So no, Colonel, I'm not interested in your Joint Trauma Command. I'm not interested in being part of a system that measures success by mission completion instead of lives saved." Hayes pulled a folder from his briefcase. "Dr. Callahan, there's something you need to see, something that wasn't declassified until 6 months ago." He opened it, revealing documents with large portions redacted, but enough visible to tell a story. After-action reports, intelligence reassessments, and one document in particular marked with classifications that suggested people very high up the chain had reviewed it.
The 3 soldiers who died, they weren't killed providing security for your operations. They were killed by a drone strike called in by the trafficking target after he escaped. He'd compromised our communications. He knew exactly where your team was because he had access to our tactical network. Iris went very still. You were set up, Hayes said quietly. The whole mission was compromised from the start. Those soldiers were going to die regardless of your choices. But you saved 11 children who would have been killed the moment we extracted the target and the insurgents had free access to that village. The trauma bay was silent except for the monitors. The Army can't officially acknowledge this because it would expose how deeply we'd been penetrated, but unofficially, at the highest levels, people know. You did the right thing. You saved lives that mattered, and the cost you paid for it was unjust. Hayes pulled a folder from his briefcase. Dr. Callahan, there's something you need to see, something that wasn't declassified until 6 months ago. He opened it, revealing documents with large portions redacted, but enough visible to tell a story. After-action reports, intelligence reassessments, and one document in particular marked with classifications that suggested people very high up the chain had reviewed it. The 3 soldiers who died, they weren't killed providing security for your operations. They were killed by a drone strike called in by the trafficking target after he escaped. He'd compromised our communications. He knew exactly where your team was because he had access to our tactical network. Iris went very still. You were set up, Hayes said quietly. The whole mission was compromised from the start. Those soldiers were going to die regardless of your choices. But you saved 11 children who would have been killed the moment we extracted the target and the insurgents had free access to that village. The trauma bay was silent except for the monitors. The Army can't officially acknowledge this because it would expose how deeply we'd been penetrated, but unofficially, at the highest levels, people know. You did the right thing. You saved lives that mattered, and the cost you paid for it was unjust. Iris's hand had stopped moving. She was staring at the documents like they were in a language she'd forgotten how to read. That's why we want you for the Joint Trauma Command, Hayes continued. Not in spite of what happened, but because of it. Because you demonstrated the exact kind of judgment we need. The ability to see past the mission to the humans involved. To make the hard call when the system's telling you something different. Before Iris could respond, the overhead speaker crackled again. Code Black. Mass casualty event. Bridge collapse on I-395. Estimated 40-plus casualties. All hands. Repeat, Code Black, all hands. Everyone froze. Code Black. The worst kind. The kind where the system got overwhelmed and triage became existential. Chen looked at Iris. Hayes looked at Iris. Even Gresham, who'd spent the last 3 hours trying to remove her from the building, looked at Iris. Dr. Callahan, Chen said quietly, I don't care about credentials right now. I don't care about protocols or suspensions or anything else. I need every surgeon I can get. Will you help? Iris looked at the monitors. At Marcus, recovering in the next bay. At the foreman who'd been minutes from death. At the folder in Hayes's hands, containing 3 years of answers she'd stopped hoping to find. She thought about orders and systems and the cost of doing the right thing. Then she thought about 40 people on a bridge who needed someone to see them as humans instead of statistics. Yes, she said. The transformation happened in seconds. Iris Callahan, the suspended physician assistant who'd been hiding behind reduced credentials for 3 years, stepped into the person she'd spent those years trying to forget. Chen, you take Trauma 1 and 2, Amara 3 and 4. Lily, you're floating between bays, whoever needs hands. Her voice carried across the ER with the kind of authority that didn't ask for permission. We set up overflow in the hallway. Every gurney, every bed. Anyone who can hold pressure on a wound gets trained in the next 60 seconds. Chen didn't question it, neither did Amara. They just moved. Gresham stood frozen, his entire understanding of hierarchy and credentials dissolving in real time. You can't just take command of my emergency department. Sir, James Parrish, who'd spent the last hour torn between duty and instinct, finally made his choice. With respect, you're in the way. Please step back.
The first ambulances arrived at 3:47 p.m. They didn't stop coming for the next 40 minutes. Bridge collapse meant vehicles, and vehicles meant crush injuries, penetrating trauma from metal and glass, and the particular kind of chaos that came from people trapped in small spaces while gravity tried to kill them. The first wave brought 6 patients. The second brought 9. By the fourth wave, they'd stopped counting individuals and started counting severity. Red tags everywhere. Critical patients who needed immediate intervention or they'd die. The kind of scenario where triage stopped being medicine and started being philosophy. Who gets saved first when everyone's dying? Iris moved through the chaos like water finding channels. She assessed in seconds, decided in heartbeats, and moved on before doubt could take root. A man with a tension pneumothorax got a needle decompression in the ambulance bay, right there on the stretcher, before he even made it inside. A woman with a femoral artery bleed got a tourniquet placed with the kind of precision that came from doing it in the dark, by feel, with explosions close enough to taste. You, come here. She pointed at a medical student who'd been standing paralyzed near the intake area. What's your name? David. David, you're going to save a life in the next 2 minutes. Give me your hand. She guided his fingers to a pressure point on a patient's groin, positioning them exactly right. Feel that? That's the femoral artery. You keep pressure right there, exactly that amount, until someone tells you to stop. Don't let go, don't ease up. That pressure is the only thing between this man and bleeding out. Understand? David's eyes were wide, but he nodded. Good, you're doing great. Don't move. She was already gone, moving to the next crisis. Lily found herself in trauma 3 with a woman who had severe abdominal trauma and was asking about her daughter. My baby, she was in the back seat. Is she okay? Please, someone tell me. Lily. Iris appeared at her shoulder. What do you see? Distended abdomen, probable internal bleeding, blood pressure dropping. Before all that, what do you see? Lily looked at the woman's face, at the fear there, at the love that was stronger than the pain. I see a mother who needs to know her child is safe. Then find out. Get someone on the radio to EMS, find out about a child from her vehicle, and come back and tell her. Even if the news is bad, especially if the news is bad, she needs to know. But the surgery will take 15 minutes to prep, and she'll fight harder if she knows. Trust me. Lily ran. Iris scrubbed in, her hands moving through the familiar ritual. Betadine, soap, water hot enough to hurt. The smell of antiseptic mixing with blood and fear. She'd done this so many times, the motions were automatic, leaving her mind free to run through the procedure before her hands even touched the patient. Chen was beside her, gowned and ready. Talk me through your triage logic. How are you deciding who goes first? Severity plus survivability. The ones who will die without immediate intervention but have a good chance if we act now. The ones who are critical but stable can wait. The ones who are too far gone, she didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. That's battlefield triage. It's the only triage that works when you're overwhelmed. We don't have enough hands to save everyone, so we save the ones we can. They worked together for the next 6 hours. Iris led 4 simultaneous surgeries, rotating between bays, teaching as she went. Lily learned to recognize compartment syndrome by the quality of a patient's pulse. David, the medical student who'd been paralyzed with fear, placed his first chest tube under Iris's guidance and watched a dying man start breathing again. At 6:23 p.m., a patient came in who made everyone stop. Male, early 60s, massive crush injuries, barely conscious. But his eyes were alert, tracking everything. And when he saw Iris, something in his expression changed. I know you, he whispered. Iris moved closer. Sir, I need you to stay still. We're going to take care of you. Kandahar, 2018. You operated on my unit. Convoy hit an IED. 3 of us should have died. His breathing was labored, each word a battle. You worked for 6 hours straight, saved all 3. I was one of them. The trauma bay went quiet. What's your name? Iris asked softly. Sergeant Major Tom Riker, retired. He coughed, blood flecking his lips. Looks like you get another shot at me, Doc. Chen was already assessing. The injuries were catastrophic. Crushed pelvis, internal bleeding, possible spinal involvement.
The kind of case where the survival statistics were grim, even in perfect conditions. Get me an LR, full trauma team. We're going to need vascular, orthopedic, and probably neuro before we're done. Iris. Chen's voice was low. His injuries, even with everything.
We have. I know the statistics. Get me the OR. She looked down at Tom Riker, at the man who'd served his country and survived one war only to be broken by a collapsing bridge in his own city, at the trust in his eyes. You saved me once, he said. I trust you to make the right call now, even if the right call is letting me go. Iris's hand found his, squeezed once. Not today, Sergeant Major. Not on my watch. The surgery took 9 hours. Iris ran point, but she pulled in every specialist available. Vascular repaired the shredded blood vessels in his pelvis. Orthopedic stabilized the fractures. Neuro cleared the spine. And through it all, Iris orchestrated like she was conducting a symphony written in blood and bone. Hayes watched from the observation gallery, along with Gresham and a handful of others. Watching someone work at that level was like witnessing something beyond skill. It was artistry meeting necessity. It was 9 hours of proof that some people were simply built different. At 3:17 a.m., Tom Riker was stable. Critical, but stable. The kind of stable that meant he'd see morning, and maybe many mornings after that. Iris stripped off her gloves and walked out of the OR. Her scrubs were soaked with sweat and blood. Her hands were steady, but her eyes carried a weight that hadn't been there 9 hours before. The weight of choosing to fight for one more life when the odds said to let go. Chen found her in the hallway. That was impossible. No, that was necessary. There's a difference. Iris, he said her name carefully, with the respect of someone who just watched mastery. Why did you really leave the military? She looked at her hands, steady hands, hands that had saved Tom Riker twice now, years and miles apart, hands that had saved 11 children at the cost of everything she'd built. Because I realized the system measures success differently than I do. They count mission completion. I count heartbeats. She met his eyes, and I couldn't keep serving a system that wanted me to value the wrong thing. Hayes appeared at the end of the hallway, still in his suit despite the hour, still waiting. But maybe, Iris said quietly, maybe it's time to stop hiding from what I am. Maybe it's time to change the system instead of running from it. Chen smiled. Does that mean what I think it means? Iris walked toward Hayes, her scrubs still stained, her posture still military, despite 3 years of trying to forget, her hands still steady, because they'd never learned how to shake. Colonel, she said, let's talk about your Joint Trauma Command. They met in an empty conference room at 4 a.m., The hospital had finally quieted, the mass casualty event reduced to the steady rhythm of post-operative monitoring and the exhausted silence of people who'd survived something that would show up in their dreams for years. Hayes sat across from Iris, a fresh folder on the table between them. Gresham was there too, looking smaller somehow, his administrative authority revealed as the hollow thing it had always been when measured against real competence. Before we talk about the future, Hayes said, we need to address the past, officially. He opened the folder, revealing a document with Department of Defense letterhead and enough classified markings to suggest multiple layers of review. This is your exoneration, full, complete. The insubordination charge from Operation Twilight Shepherd has been vacated. Your medical discharge has been reclassified as honorable, and there's a formal commendation being added to your record for actions above and beyond in saving 11 civilian lives under hostile fire. Iris stared at the document without touching it. 3 years. 3 years of carrying the weight of those deaths, of believing she'd traded her team's lives for children who shouldn't have been part of the equation. 3 years of guilt that had driven her into hiding. The soldiers, she said quietly, their families. Do they know? They will. The declassification includes the actual circumstances of their deaths.
They'll know their loved ones died because of enemy action, not because of your choices. Hayes paused. Several of the families have already been briefed. 2 of them specifically asked that we find you, to thank you. Iris's hands pressed flat against the cable, steady, but the pressure behind them was visible. The children, Hayes continued, all 11 survived. They were evacuated to Pakistan, then eventually resettled through various refugee programs. We've been tracking them because they're potential intelligence sources, but also, he pulled out photographs, because they asked about you, the doctor who stayed, the American woman who chose them when her own command didn't. The photos showed young people, teenagers now, scattered across different countries, going to school, working, living lives that wouldn't have existed if Iris had followed orders. One photo showed a girl, maybe 16, wearing a medical school sweatshirt. That's Amina, Hayes said. She's studying medicine in Germany. She says she wants to be a surgeon like the woman who saved her life. Iris's eyes stayed on the photo, on the proof that disobedience sometimes looked like salvation when you gave it enough time. Gresham cleared his throat. Dr. Callahan, I owe you an apology. Several, actually. His voice had lost its administrative edge, replaced by something that sounded almost human. I spent 3 months trying to find a reason to fire you because you made me uncomfortable, because you questioned my decisions, because you acted with authority I thought you didn't have. You were right, Iris said simply. I didn't have it, not officially, but you had something more important, competence, judgment, the ability to see what needed to be done and the courage to do it. He looked down at his hands. I have a brother, Michael. He died 2 years ago in a VA hospital. Sepsis from a wound infection that should have been caught days earlier. But the hospital was understaffed, overwhelmed, and operating under protocols that prioritized cost savings over patient outcomes. The room was silent, except for the distant beep of monitors through the walls. I've spent 2 years telling myself it wasn't my fault, that I was just doing my job, managing budgets, following guidelines. But the truth is, I've been enforcing a system that values the wrong things, just like the military system that tried to destroy you for saving children. Gresham met her eyes. I can't bring Michael back, but I can stop being part of the problem. What are you saying? Hayes asked. I'm resigning as hospital administrator, effective immediately. Gresham pulled an envelope from his jacket. I've already written the letter, and I'm recommending that St. Benedict's create a new position, Director of Trauma Services, someone with full authority over emergency protocols, staffing, and clinical decisions, someone who answers to medical necessity, not administrative convenience. He slid a second document across the table toward Iris. The position is yours if you want it. Full surgical privileges, complete autonomy, your choice of staff and protocols. The only requirement is that you stay and teach what you know. Iris looked at the offer, then at Hayes, then back at Gresham. That's not a small thing you're offering. That's power, real power, over how this hospital operates. Yes, Gresham said. And after watching you work for 18 hours straight, saving lives that everyone else had written off, I can't think of anyone who deserves it more, or anyone I'd trust more with it. Hayes leaned forward. The Joint Trauma Command still stands. Full colonel position. You'd be designing protocols for the entire military medical system, plus civilian integration. It's bigger scope, more resources, national impact. But, Iris heard the hesitation, but it's also more politics, more bureaucracy, more fighting, the same systems that broke you the first time. Hayes's voice carried the weariness of someone who'd spent decades in those systems. I won't lie to you. It's important work, necessary work. But it's also exhausting in ways that have nothing to do with medicine. Iris stood, walking to the window. Outside, the city was starting to wake, early morning light turning the sky from black to gray. Somewhere in the hospital, Marcus Webb was recovering from surgery he shouldn't have survived. Tom Reichard was breathing because someone had refused to let statistics matter more than lives. I have conditions, she said finally, for both of you. Hayes and Gresham exchanged glances. The Joint Trauma Command. I'll consult. Design your protocols, train your people, integrate civilian and military medicine, but I won't do it full-time, and I won't wear the uniform again. She turned to face them. Because the moment I put that uniform back on, I'm part of the hierarchy again. I'm part of a system where orders matter more than judgment, and I can't do that. Hayes nodded slowly. Consultant status. You'd have the authority without the chain of command. I can make that work. And here, Iris looked at Gresham. I'll take the director position, but I want something else. A training program. Open to anyone. Military veterans, paramedics, PAs, nurses. Anyone who has field experience but not traditional credentials. We teach them combat medicine protocols adapted for civilian use. We turn their experience into qualifications the system will recognize. You want to create a pipeline, Chen said from the doorway. No one had heard him arrive. For people like you, people who have the skills but not the paperwork, people the system overlooks because they don't fit the traditional path. Exactly. Gresham paused, calculating. That's going to be expensive and controversial. The medical establishment doesn't like alternative pathways. The medical establishment needs to learn that competence comes from a lot of places, Iris said. And if we're going to handle the next mass casualty event, the next pandemic, the next whatever comes, we need every capable person we can get, even if they learned their skills in places the establishment doesn't want to acknowledge. Chen smiled. I'm in. Whatever you need, whatever fights we have to have with the board or the accreditation bodies, I'm in. Amara appeared behind him. So am I. And I know at least a dozen former military medical personnel who are working below their qualifications because the transition to civilian credentials is impossible. You build this program, they'll come. Hayes stood, extending his hand. Dr. Callahan, you have a deal. Consultant to the Joint Trauma Command, part-time, civilian status. I'll have the contracts drawn up by end of week. Gresham stood as well. And you have full support from the hospital. I'll fight the board if I have to. This program happens. Iris shook both their hands, feeling the weight of 3 years starting to lift. Not gone. It would never be fully gone, but lighter, manageable, turned into something that might help someone else carry their own weight. There's one more thing, she said. The 11, the children from Kandahar. I want to establish a scholarship fund for refugees pursuing medical education, named after the 3 soldiers
who died. Their sacrifice should mean something beyond the mission. Hayes's eyes glistened slightly. I think their families would like that very much. The sun was fully up now, light streaming through the conference room windows. A new day, a new beginning, the kind that only came after you'd survived the night. Lily knocked softly on the doorframe. Dr. Callahan, Marcus Webb is awake. He's asking for you. Iris smiled. Tell him I'll be right there. She was exactly where she was meant to be. 6 months later, the conference room at St. Benedict's looked different. The walls were covered with charts showing trauma survival rates that had improved by 23% since the bridge collapse. Photographs of the first graduating class of the Combat Medicine Integration Program lined one wall. 27 faces representing paramedics, former military medics, and career nurses who'd been given a path to expand their scope of practice. Iris stood at the front of the room, wearing scrubs and a white coat that finally had her full credentials embroidered on it. Dr. Iris Callahan, Director of Trauma Services. Behind her, a presentation displayed data that hospitals across the region were already requesting to study. The audience was a mix of hospital staff, Pentagon representatives, and journalists covering what had become a national story. The physician assistant, who'd been hours from termination, revealed as a decorated combat surgeon, now transforming how America trained its emergency medical personnel. But Iris wasn't looking at them. She was looking at the back row, where Marcus Webb sat in his new paramedic uniform, 19 years old and alive because someone had seen what others missed. Next to him, Tom Riker, in a wheelchair, still in physical therapy but improving every day. And at the end of the row, a young woman with dark eyes and a medical school sweatshirt, Amina, who'd flown from Germany specifically for this presentation. The traditional model of medical education assumes a linear path, Iris said, her voice carrying the same calm authority that had commanded trauma bays during the worst night of many people's lives. Undergraduate degree, medical school, residency. But that model misses something crucial. It misses the people who learned medicine in the places where failure meant death, where there was no backup, no attending to call, no second chances. She advanced the slide. Images of field hospitals, combat medics, disaster response teams. These people have skills the traditional model doesn't know how to value, so we created a program that does. Another slide. The curriculum for the Combat Medicine Integration Program. 6 months of intensive training, blending field experience with civilian protocols, ending with expanded certification that let participants practice at higher levels. Our first cohort of 27 has already shown results. Faster triage times, better field stabilization, higher survival rates in the critical first hour after injury. She paused, letting the data speak. These aren't just numbers. These are lives that wouldn't have been saved 6 months ago. Hayes stood from his seat in the second row. Dr. Callahan, the Pentagon has been studying your protocols. We're seeing similar improvements in military trauma outcomes, but more importantly, we're seeing better transitions for veterans moving into civilian medical roles. Can you speak to how that integration is working? The barriers were never about capability, Iris said. They were about credentialing. A combat medic who's performed 200 field procedures can't get hired as a paramedic in most states because their training doesn't fit the civilian certification model. We're fixing that. We're building bridges between military experience and civilian credentials, recognizing that someone who learned trauma medicine in Kandahar has skills that matter in Baltimore. A journalist raised her hand. Dr. Callahan, 6 months ago, you were facing suspension for insubordination. Now you're being called a revolutionary in emergency medicine. How do you reconcile those two realities? Iris smiled slightly. I don't think they're different realities. I think they're the same story from different perspectives. 6 months ago, I prioritized a patient's life over hospital protocol. That looked like insubordination to administration, but to the patient, it looked like medicine. The only thing that changed is which perspective the institution decided to value. So you're saying the system was wrong? I'm saying the system was measuring the wrong things, and when you measure the wrong things, you get the wrong outcomes. Iris advanced to another slide. Testimonials from patients, from families, from the medical students and residents who trained under her new protocols. Medicine isn't about following rules. It's about saving lives. And sometimes those two things align and sometimes they don't. The question is, when they diverge, which one matters more? The room was silent. Chen stood from his seat in the front row. I'd like to add something, if I may. He turned to the audience. I've been practicing trauma surgery for 23 years. I've trained under some of the best surgeons in the country, but I've learned more from Dr. Callahan in 6 months than I learned in my entire residency. Not techniques, not procedures, but judgment, the ability to see what matters and act on it, even when the system says to wait. He gestured to the data on the screen. That 23% improvement in survival rates, that's not because we bought new equipment or hired more staff. It's because Dr. Callahan taught us to trust our competence over our credentials, to act when we see something that needs acting on, to value the patient in front of us more than the protocol on paper. Amara stood as well. I want to speak to something else. 6 months ago, this hospital had a culture of hierarchy. Attendings didn't listen to residents didn't listen to nurses, and nobody listened to the PAs. Dr. Callahan didn't just change our protocols, she changed our culture. She showed us that competence can come from anywhere, and wisdom often comes from the people closest to the patients. Lily raised her hand from the third row. I was one of the people who dismissed Dr. Callahan when she first started. I saw her credentials, not her competence. I saw her position, not her experience. Her voice wavered slightly. She taught me that the letters after someone's name matter less than what they can do with their hands, and that the most important question in medicine isn't what does the protocol say, but what does this patient need? The presentation continued for another 30 minutes. Questions from hospital administrators wanting to implement similar programs. Questions from Pentagon officials about scaling the military integration. Questions from journalists about the broader implications for how America trained its medical workforce. But the moment that mattered came after, when the room had cleared and Iris stood alone with Amina.
"You came a long way," Iris said quietly. "You saved my life," Amina's English was accented but clear, "and my brother's lives, and my sister's lives, 11 of us who should have died that day. I wanted to say thank you, and to tell you that I'm going to be a surgeon, like you." Iris's hand went to her wrist, to the tattoo with the Roman numeral 11. "You don't have to be like me. You just have to be the best version of yourself. You stayed when your commanders told you to leave. You operated for hours while people were shooting. You saved us when everyone said we didn't matter enough to save." Amina's eyes were fierce. "I want to be exactly like you. Someone who values lives over orders. Someone who does the right thing even when the system says it's wrong." Iris pulled her into a hug, felt the weight of 3 years of guilt finally transform into something else. Not absolution, she'd carry those 3 soldiers forever, but purpose. The knowledge that choices made in impossible circumstances had rippled forward into futures that wouldn't have existed otherwise. Marcus appeared in the doorway, Tom beside him in his wheelchair. "Dr. Callahan, there's someone here to see you." A man in dress uniform stood in the hallway, older, maybe 60, with the kind of bearing that suggested decades of service. He carried a folded flag and a photograph. "Dr. Callahan, I'm General Robert Price. My son was Specialist James Price. He was one of the soldiers killed during Operation Twilight Shepherd." Iris's breath caught. "I wanted to meet you," he continued, "to tell you that my son's death wasn't your fault, and to thank you for saving those children. James believed in protecting civilians. He believed that our mission was about more than completing objectives. It was about representing something better." His voice roughened. "He would have been proud to know his sacrifice meant 11 children got to live, got to grow up, got to become people like her." He gestured to Amina. "Colonel Hayes told me about the scholarship fund, about using my son's name and the names of his teammates to help refugees pursue medical education." He unfolded the flag, pressed it into Iris's hands. "This was draped on his casket. I want you to have it, to remember that his sacrifice meant something, that your choice meant something, that sometimes disobeying orders is the most honorable thing a soldier can do." Iris held the flag with shaking hands, the only time they'd shaken in years. "Thank you," she whispered. The general saluted, not a formal military salute, but something more personal, respect from one person who'd lost everything to another who'd almost done the same. Hayes appeared at the end of the hallway. "Dr. Callahan, there's a situation developing. Multi-vehicle accident on the interstate. They're requesting your team for triage consultation." Iris handed the flag carefully to Amina. "Keep this safe for me." "Where are you going?" "To work," Iris smiled. "To do what I was always meant to do." She walked toward the trauma bay, Marcus and Tom following, her team assembling around her with the practiced efficiency of people who'd learned to trust each other's competence over their credentials. The monitors were already showing incoming patients, the organized chaos of an emergency department doing what it was built to do. Iris pulled on gloves, her hands steady, her mind clear, her purpose absolute. Somewhere in Germany, a girl would study her medical textbooks with a folded flag on her desk, remembering the woman who chose her life when everyone else said it didn't matter. Somewhere in the Pentagon, protocols were being rewritten to value judgment over hierarchy, competence over credentials. Somewhere in America, veterans were finding pathways back into the work they'd been trained to do, no longer trapped between their experience and the system's inability to recognize it. And in Trauma Bay 1 at St. Benedict's Hospital, Dr. Iris Callahan stood ready, surrounded by a team that had learned to see what mattered, to act when action was needed, and to value lives over everything else. The doors opened. The stretcher came through. Her hands moved. The work continued. It always did.